Tuesday all capital letters?
Say,
Is Tuesday all capital letters?
don't think so.
Okay.
Or the password?
The password, yeah.
No. Initial cap.
I don't know why the sound was on.
Oh yeah, I think you're muted.
Turning your sound off completely.
Mute.
It's not the muting, it's turning the sound coming out of your computer off.
It seems to be working, yeah.
What's happened is that one of our most faithful members doesn't like me to be turning the computer around to show the other people in the room. So I invited my colleagues here at the monastery to bring their devices, and it's creating some terrible feedback loop.
I think,
Are you all muted?
yes.
Are you muted?
There's two Dhamma monastery.
Yes, I know that.
Yeah.
And
This one is still speaking out of. The actual sound and turn the volume down.
you have to both turn off your volume and mute yourself.
It doesn't come down all the way down.
And mute yourself.
Mute.
Okay, somebody assist her. It has to be both.
It doesn't work.
It's okay, we'll wait.
Mm. Mm.
You're welcoming all the people whose names I just mentioned. And also, I'm still getting an echo.
Do you want me to try to turn them off?
I think maybe take off the other devices. Maybe just close the other devices because it's not working. It's still creating an echo. Coming to a meditation posture, making the body both upright and relaxed, making the body balanced. Letting go of all of the activities and excitement of today. And just making a determination to simply be present in the here and now. Just observing what arises within this body and mind. Stabilizing our awareness around the sensations that arise in the body. Aware of the posture of the body, sitting, aware of the weight of the body, pressing on the cushion or on the floor, or on the chair. And bringing awareness to the top of the head, aware of sensations on the top of the head. And methodically moving awareness all around the head, on the sides and the back, the entire head. Exploring sensations on the face. And relaxing the face. And anything on the head that may be tight or unpleasant in any way, just think of relaxing with that. Not compounding a feeling with a reaction. Just leave it alone and relax with the sensations that arise anywhere on the head or the face. Moving awareness down to the neck and shoulders and releasing the tension there, letting the neck and shoulders relax. aware of sensations going down one arm and down to the hand. And then the other hand and up the other arm. Sensations in the torso, the chest down to the belly. And sensations on the legs, down to the knees. And from the knees down to the feet. All the way to the bottom of the feet. And moving awareness up the body, aware of sensations and being relaxed with the sensations in the body. From the feet up to the knees. Up to the top of the legs. The sensation of the seat pressing the cushion. The sensation on the back of the body. The lower back and the upper back. Up to the shoulders. The neck and the head. And letting awareness sweep gently up and down the body. Sensitive to all of the feelings that arise, the sensations that arise from each part of the body. And if the mind wanders into thought, just notice that and come back to the body. And if sweeping up and down the body is too much activity, just let the mind be still, resting on the breath or resting in awareness of the entire body. And coming towards the end of this time of meditation, bringing up the thought of kindness for oneself and for all beings through the blessings of this practice. May I be well, happy, and secure. And may all beings be well, happy, and secure. May I be protected from any danger, any anxiety, any negativity. And may all beings also be safe. Dear friends, last Sunday we were looking at a certain sutta, the discourse on the six sense bases, or on the six senses. And I realized that the translation that was used was wrong on one particular paragraph. And that was the paragraph that was explaining how the Buddha handles his emotional reactions, which is kind of amazing, even to think that the Sammasambuddha, the perfectly enlightened one, teacher of gods and humans, still has emotions. And what I wanted to kind of take off from this and to reflect a little bit about the development of equanimity as something which is not a dulling down or a blocking off or putting a big soft cotton wad of buffer zone, muffling our emotions, but instead is actually the safe container that allows sensitivity, that allows the natural emotional equipment that we have to do its job. So the passage, this is about when the Buddha is teaching. It's near the end of the sutta. And it's the compassionate one seeking the welfare of the monks. The teacher teaches the Dhamma to his disciples out of compassion. He tells them, this is for your welfare, this is for your happiness. But his disciples do not want to hear or give ear or exert their minds to understand. They err and turn aside from the teacher's dispensation. With that, the Tathagata is not satisfied and feels no satisfaction. That's his emotion, the emotion of not satisfied. Yet he dwells unmoved, mindful, and fully aware. And that's the container of equanimity. Not being dissatisfied, is anatamano. It means dissatisfied, displeased, disgruntled, troubled, and worried. Okay, so the Blessed One, because of compassion, you see. And then the word that the translation I just read, which is Bhikkhu Bodhi. So he is troubled and he is experiencing being troubled or being dissatisfied. So this experiencing, Patisamvedeti, that's got Vedana in it. So it's got the feeling is in it. It's like what the first initial experience and the way we experience our life through the body in this way, which is very, very direct, not involving fabricating any stories or anything like that. It's just the immediacy of it. And then he remains, Bhikkhuvati translates as unmoved. And the Pali word is anavasuto, which literally means not leaking, not rotten, free from lust, free from defilement. And so then it would be like, well, the human body, we have the operation of the body, and it's covered by skin, and the skin of the body is intact. It doesn't have open wounds that are oozing. Or if you had a fruit that was, fresh and it's there in the kitchen and it hasn't yet started to go off, and then the skin of that fruit is still intact and it's holding the contents. And so I kind of see that the Buddha has got this what's translated as being unmoved. That's why I think it doesn't really fully catch the image of what the Pali is. The Buddha's psychological container has that integrity so that it's not leaking and it's not rotten. It's holding. And so then whether it be pleasure or displeasure, the container is there and it's providing the space for the mindfulness, for one to be unmoved, mindful, fully aware. Now, then it goes on, there's 3 cases. One is where the monks don't listen. One is a mixed bag. Some of them listen and some don't. And then the third one is the monks are all listening and attending to what the Buddha said. In the second case, so the one that's this a mixed situation, it says some of them give ear and some don't. So he feels both satisfaction and not satisfaction. He experiences both dissatisfaction and experiences satisfaction. And in that case, despite that, it says he remains free from both of them, and he dwells in equanimity. And here's where equanimity is explicitly brought up. It made me think that oftentimes in our ordinary life, we face a lot of a mixture of the things we like and don't like, which are kind of like coming together in a package that's very mixed up together. So like we have a love-hate relationship with our dear companions, or our dear friends, or our relatives, or something like that. Or we are involved in relating to the pleasures of life in an unskillful way. And so we're both getting like the thrill and the excitement and the happiness from the pleasures of life, but then we're also getting the rebound and the headache or, whatever happens after you've been on a binge or something like that. So you're getting both the pleasure and pain is like thrown in together. And it is those situations in life that are complicated, that are the mixture that may be especially destabilizing, and where we truly are in need of having equanimity as the equalizing factor that allows us to keep on our balance, to stay steady, whether we're being pulled this way or that way. And then the third person, or the third case that comes along is where the bhikkhus are all paying attention, giving ear, exerting their minds to understand. They do not, or they don't turn aside from the teacher's dispensation. And with that, the Tathagata is satisfied. He feels satisfaction. And yet he dwells unmoved. And then it's going back to that same Pali word of analusatos, which is like not leaking, not becoming rotten. And we could know that somebody who is a charismatic religious leader or a charismatic speaker, if he has a lot of adulation from followers, there is a danger that that teacher could become rotten because of becoming intoxicated with praise. And so then the Blessed One is not immune to being pleased when the students are listening, but he stabilizes his mind in order to protect against becoming rotten in that way. So the quality of equanimity is a state of mind, ideally, if it's fully developed. It's a state of mind that cannot be swayed by biases and preferences. So if the thought comes up, I like this or I don't like that, the equanimous mind is able to see those reactions arising as being something very fleeting, very changeable, not something to be identified with as a self, and not something to be given the weight of being like an important reality. It's just a phenomenon that comes and goes, that liking and disliking. And so the mind then remains stable. Even to me, there's also something, it's not just neutrality, it's neutrality plus something else, which is, I could call it contentment, but it's having this kindly and compassionate attitude towards what we encounter, whether it be our internal mental state or whether it be external things that we encounter. So if we're driving and somebody unskillfully cuts us off in the traffic or something like that, if the mind is able to, stay, we would have a good, useful emotion to like quickly, very quickly have a emotional reaction that helps us to put the brakes on and to avoid a crash by somebody cutting us off. And so that was good. But then because of developing mindfulness, we're not building that up into a story about, oh, that's so-and-so, or, some hatred towards that person or something that's a fabrication. But instead just simply seeing what happened and even being able to observe the arousal in the physical body from that, and being able to see how it goes down. But then equanimity, this idea of contentment, is having a bias towards kindness, so that also there's a bit of kindness towards that other driver. There's a sense like taking a big picture view and say, oh, those drivers, people make mistakes in the highway. And just having that attitude of acceptance, which enables us to smile for things that are whatever they are, so that we don't pick up the stimulus. In the way that Buddhism or mindfulness movement has been expressed in westernized psychology, when they talk about equanimity, one of the ideas is what they call a non-judging attitude, which in the Theravada we are a little bit, there's a danger in, if that's all you know about the Dhamma, because we know that some karmas are skillful and some karmas are unskillful. And we learn to develop a right effort to find out how not to nurture, perpetuate, feed, and nurture and strengthen the unskillful dhammas that arise for us. And then we learn how to arouse skillful dhammas and to bring them into existence, to cultivate them and let them reach the maturity of their development. And so to do that, we are making a distinction. We're not being completely non-judgmental. But at the same time, that non-judgmental attitude is assuming a stance of being like a witness to our own experience. So when something unskillful comes along, usually on the side of greed or hatred, or on the neutral side, the quality of having an I don't care mind, the mind of being like cut off or blunted or something like that. So just we have an impartial attitude towards our own stuff. So we say, okay, that's what it is. This is where it comes from. This is where it's leading to. And we have to first be able to see our own stuff in reality the way it is, before we were able to bring about this right effort of learning how to cultivate and favor the wholesome, and how to denourish and learn to cut off and protect ourselves from the unwholesome. So just like when we're driving the highway, the car cuts us off, and we think, oh, drivers do that. Just sort of like take a step back and say, oh, there's something that happens. But it doesn't mean that we're in favor of bad driving. It doesn't mean that we want to say, oh, bad driving, let's do that, or something like that. We're not picking it up in that way, nor are we reacting against it. And then having that so-called non-judgmental attitude is what makes space to be able to dedicate our awareness to observing reality the way it is. if we're too involved in reacting to it, we don't have enough bandwidth to be able to see it the way it is. And then having that attitude of acceptance, even seeing things that are unskillful in us, or unskillful in others, unskillful or harmful in the world, we have to be able to accept that that's a reality before we can take the next step. So, and we have this this attitude of interest to see how it really is, or else we won't be able to make progress in the path. So even something like if you heard that dukkha, suffering, is caused by craving, and that craving should be abandoned, and that with the abandoning of craving comes the end of suffering, the end of dukkha. And a person who was overly engaged in controlling and reacting to their experience, they wouldn't be able to see it. They wouldn't be able to let go of craving, because they're kind of like, they need that craving in order to kind of keep it together. And so you sometimes see beginners who really see the advantage in craving and are frightened of letting go of craving, because they think they'll become like a zombie if they let go of their craving. Or people can be really frightened about the non-self, and they become frightened that they would like really fall apart if they actually like realized about non-self. So having this attitude of this open-minded, impartial, accepting attitude to experience and understand what's arising for us in a way which is so open-minded and interested, is actually what we need in order to be able to apprehend or to see these truths that are subtle, and in which we may have some underlying resistance, but we don't really see our resistance unless we can cultivate this equanimity. So we need to cultivate equanimity, otherwise it would not be safe for us to realize the Four Noble Truths. Last of all, the thing I'm going to say about this, and I was trying to think about, since I'm talking about the Buddha's emotions, and emotions is a very westernized way of thinking about it. When a person has a training to control their emotions, that actually can be useful if somebody is overly emotional and has a lot of negative, harmful emotions. They may learn to deliberately not pay attention to things that are triggering, in order to kind of like see that they have a choice in what they're paying attention to. Or they may learn to like control their emotional expression, so that like, even if once I visited a prison, I had a wonderful conversation. This was a program. I had a great conversation with some prisoners, and one of the guys, his great thing was somebody, like in line or something like that, somebody touched him or in a way that previously would have caused a big reaction. And normally this man, he's a big, strong man, he would have walloped that guy so, powerfully that it was in danger of a grave injury or death, because that was, his training. And because of whatever therapy or whatever effort he'd been making to improve himself in prison, somebody touched him and he just sat there and he didn't punch the guy. So that's restraint. That's good, but that's not really very much getting towards real equanimity. So the real equanimity, here's my idea, is that by developing mindfulness, we got such a strong habitual awareness of the transitory and insubstantial nature of emotional responses, so that we don't pick them up and start fabricating them into something that I call, this is the greatest story ever told. Not the Bible. The story of me is the greatest story ever told for each person. So it doesn't start fabricating as the story of me. And because the fabrication doesn't get started, then we have the bandwidth, or we have room for awareness. And with that room for awareness and gradually coming to see what is really for our true welfare and our true happiness, then the reactions based on liking and disliking, loving and hating, all those dualities would be, I'd say they'd be denourished and crowded out, so that then they become less and less a prominent part of our repertoire of reactions. And then the equanimous, contented, interested, kind, and mindful response is more primarily what it is. Now, this is my Dhamma reflection. I made the effort to allow enough time to have some conversation. And I would really like to know if anybody was completely confused or if you have any questions about what I'm trying to explain, or if you have your own story to tell about the success you've experienced or the difficulties you've experienced in cultivating equanimity. I'm going to switch my screen to the gallery view so I can see all of you. And 1, 2, 3, there's several people in the room and they may like to speak. And if they do, because of our poor technology, I'll have to turn around the camera and they'll have to come up to the camera in order to make their comment. Okay. Do I hear somebody wanting to speak or wanting to comment? Okay. Heather, welcome to, I think you just signed up with us recently, so welcome.
I did, yes. I've been there twice before. But anyway,
Just hold on 1 second.
So that's a word I heard probably 4 or 5 years ago, and it's never left me. And I put it on my dashboard. I put it here. I put it there. I put it all sorts of places. And I look it up in the dictionary, well, on the internet. But I like your definition, because it's not just generosity, because I keep thinking it's generous, and it is generous. But I really understood when you said about the person cutting you off on the freeway. And I do that, but I didn't have a word for it. You know what I mean? I have all these experiences and feelings, but I like to have words for what it is I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And I felt like that explanation of the freeway of it broadened my definition of what equanimity is I'm looking for, because it seems to be such an important word. That it's so I didn't even know that's what your talk was tonight. So I was like, oh, perfect. So I think that's it. Just I wouldn't mind more. I think it's just opened the door because it's just been after me for 4 years or so. Like equanimity, what is it? And I know it's calm, but not just calmness of emotions, but calmness of mind, like you were talking about. So I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. And it's always interesting if we pick up a new idea, then to try to review it later on, review it in our minds to see if we remember it, and then to check it out as we go through the day tomorrow or through the week or something, and see whether you can notice equanimity in your life and how it works, and see, because this is what I'm trying to say. We want to see things as they actually are. And without even preconceptions, just say, okay, we've got a concept of equanimity. We're not trying to force ourselves to be equanimous. We're trying to notice as it really is what's arising for us that is fitting into that area.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, Dory.
So Aya, as you were talking, one thing that came to my mind is the fifth daily recollection. I am the heir of my own karma. So this idea of the good intention going out, but for each one is the heir of one's own karma. And I think the acceptance of that really helps toward equanimity, in the sense that I may do my best to try and help my fellow beings, right? But I cannot control that result. So the intention's there, and if I'm going to react in one way or another, it's in the, I guess, for myself and for others to do it in the highest way, because that anger and that reactivity isn't going to add to anything, except maybe sometimes I think you have to show emotion to get through to someone. And it looks like the Buddha does do that at times, like he'll scold someone, but it's with this idea that that's a necessary communicative element. I don't think it's so much to vent his spleen, in a sense, but it's for someone's well-being.
Yes. I think any great teacher, whether the Buddha or a living teacher we may encounter, they have the quality of authenticity. And that means both something maybe intellectual, but also emotional authenticity. And that's how you can trust them, or how, like, if you are authentic with the people you have to deal with, that is a great way for them to be able to trust you, because they know that you're being, for real with them. Yeah. Nevertheless, if what you have is like, I am unbalanced, filled with afflictive emotional reactivity, and then I will be authentic with, others with my emotionally reactive, over the top stuff, that would not be beneficial, and it would be in a way like emotional manipulation that can be extremely uncomfortable. You probably might have to work on a day-to-day basis with some people who are actually mentally ill, and you can see how extremely manipulative a mentally ill person can be. and they're kind of like, they're using their emotions in that way. So you don't want to do that. You want to cultivate wholesome, balanced emotions, and then you want to be using those wholesome emotions in an authentic way to get through to people. Yeah. And equanimity is part of that. I see Bob has a comment.
Yeah, you asked the question about what is it that we do to bring about our own equanimity, and two things came to mind when you asked that. One was kind of just more, I don't know, conceptual or attitudinal. That U Tejaniya, a few things that he said that I hold on to that I find very useful, and one is his reminder that all that's happening, whether it's outside of us or inside of us, to put it that way, in the body or out, is all just part of nature. So it's not like there's anything going wrong. There's not like there's anything going right. It's just part of nature. It's how nature works. And now things could happen that still cause suffering, but that doesn't mean in any existential sense that it's right or wrong. It's just kind of what happens. So I try to remind myself, oh, this is part of nature. And then I could observe it, like I would observe going to the zoo, or anything like that. This is just how it's unfolding. How do I know? Well, because it is unfolding that way, So just the kind of the attitude check is one thing that helps me kind of get unhooked and just be able to observe. So that's kind of a more recent way to think about it. And another thing that I don't know where I picked it up, but for years, I remember just in terms of when things happen, to notice what's going on in your body. I'm tight here, this is rising there, and rather than be swept away by it, just kind of watch it like a movie. And I had one event that was so kind of dramatic that it comes to mind frequently, that I was in a meeting years ago in Southern California with a bunch of people, and we were trying to get to the plane to fly back up here, me and a friend, and we both had appointments, so we had to be back at a certain time. So this person in Southern California was driving us to the airport, and it was so crowded he couldn't get his car in. So the only way to make the plane on time was to run, like from 2 blocks away. So we got out of the car, we got our suitcases and just started running. And my friend who I was going with, she just started screaming and cursing. I won't repeat what she said, but every step was just more curses and screaming. And I said, to myself, this is time to meditate, and I kind of dropped into my body and I ran and I watched my breathing and I watched this and I just was watching the whole thing. And she's screaming and cursing. So we get to the terminal. We are there on time. She is an exhausted wreck and I'm relaxed. And even though we ran both as fast, and to me that was a real a demonstration right there, that if you're just with it and watch it happening, even though we were both stressed, I was not a wreck and she was. So I go back to that memory when I think about equanimity. So that's my share. Thank you.
I'm going to feedback what I heard you say.
Sure.
And when you come to our next board meeting, I won't think about the metaphor of the zoo. But you pointed out how the mindful attitude, observing the body, by nature, it has an equanimous tone to it. And so just coming back into observing is going towards equanimity. And then in the converse, getting swept up in the like and dislike, you may think that if you're, cursing about what you hate, that you're really experiencing it strongly, but actually you're getting cut off from your own experience while you're involved in fabricating all that dislike.
Hmm.
So the reactivity doesn't leave the room for mindful awareness. And if you can cut the reactivity enough to be mindfully aware, and then the mindful awareness naturally inclines towards equanimity. Yeah, that's a very nice story. Thank you.
If
I
I
think
could just add one piece,
Yes.
but the good news is that it's never not salvageable, because if you find that, if you see yourself liking or disliking, rather than identifying with the liking or disliking, you could step back from that too and say, oh, this is also part of nature. Liking is coming up. So whatever it is, you could take a step back and go meta to it, and the META meta, and include that in what you're observing. So you can always get untrapped by it.
I'm going to turn my camera off for just a second while Linda comes up to speak with us. Okay.
First, I want to thank you for unpacking that part of the sutta from Sunday, because I was aware when you read it that it was a wrong translation. And then I went back and read Bhikkhu Bodhi, and I could see that he was more parallel to the Pali, but it still didn't quite make sense. And the way you have expressed it makes total sense. So thank you for that. In terms of developing equanimity, my own experience, I didn't even set out to develop equanimity, but I ended up living at Birken Monastery for 8 years. And Ajahn Sona was widely known in monastic circles as the equanimous monk. And so I had a Kalyana role model for 8 years. And I remember very distinctly one particular instance where I was very upset because some guest had not been following the guidelines, which were printed and posted everywhere. And I discussed it with Ajahn Sona, and he says, well, you don't expect people to follow the guidelines, do you? And I said, I certainly do. But he clearly didn't. And I mean, expectation is one form of craving. Right. And so what he was pointing out was that it was my expectation, which in this case was unrealistic, that was causing my suffering, and that it would be much more skillful to just let that go. So that's, that's that little thing. The other thing I wanted to say is your example about being on the highway. It's so interesting. Each person develops their own particular little twist on it. For me, I think if I say, oh, drivers do that, that's shading into negativity, because that's branding all drivers, or could be. Whereas actually the fact is that 95% of the drivers are being perfectly responsible. It's only a small portion that are being. But so what I do when people do strange things in traffic, and particularly people who speed, I always have in my mind the possibility that they've got a pregnant woman in the car who's giving birth, or there's some real emergency. And so what I do is I say, may you arrive at your destination safely, and may everyone around you on the road be safe. So I think that's shading into the metta and the compassion, rather than just, just the equanimity. So that's my little way of dealing with traffic.
Thank you. In dealing with unpleasant other people who seem very unpleasant to us, a long time ago, I developed something it's sort of related to a version of Tonglen, but I don't like to call it that because I'm not properly trained in Tonglen. But, Tonglen has the idea of on the in-breath to accept everything which is dark, hot, painful, suffering in the world. And then on the out-breaths to give out light. Um, it's challenging practice to think of accepting the things that are dark and painful. But what works for me is something on the outside in the world seems to be evil, unwholesome, bad, like not just painful, but not just like painful, like a natural phenomenon, but the unskillful and unwholesome aspects of humanity or of beings that like accepting that and knowing that like somewhere like inside of me, I also have the potential because I'm also part of nature, like that's part of nature, like Bob was saying. And I have that too. I also have it, even though it's bad. And like the things within me that are bad, as long as I'm trying to crush them, I'm never successful in my practice. But if I say, well, I've got this, and then somehow like marrying the darkness outside and the darkness inside, change it to light, and then give it back as light. So it's, maybe that seems too complicated, but there is something about the internal pattern. Like say all the drivers are not bad drivers, but it's just because of causes and conditions. So at the moment, most of them are not manifesting as bad. So it's possible. So then the real compassion is in a way accepting and forgiving either the potential or the reality for all of us to be unskillful in some way. And when it's accepted that way, then it can be worked with. And then it may be able to dissipate. But as long as it's being repudiated and denied, then it's not able to transform. The highway example, maybe. I don't know if that's too much of a lively example. See if there's any of the others who are in the virtual space who would like to comment. Okay, Brenna.
I have, I guess, kind of a question more so than a comment. I guess what I struggle with most is, especially in virtual spaces, in online spaces where you're not actually like on the highway, or you're not talking to someone face to face. Maybe not on like Zoom calls, but when you're messaging someone, or if people are being mean online to you or something, I find it much more difficult to have a sense of equanimity towards people when you can't actually sort of feel their presence. And it might be a matter of what Bob was talking about, of just being in your body again. But I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that, if there's a way to approach that.
I feel that this is part of our natural programming as being human animals, that we are somewhat programmed to be nice to the people who are our own relatives. And then strangers, we don't have that programming for. And I even heard, I don't know if this story is true or not, but I read it in a book, that among some traditional historical ancient people, if they were traveling away from their village and they meet somebody, there would be like this long kind of a diplomatic discussion to find out about their relatives. And you find their relatives and your relatives, and you're trying to find whether some way or another you can find that there is some connection between yourself and this person. And if there's a connection, you can be friends. And then if there's not a connection, you have to fight. So, then the practice of loving kindness, in which we take like the closed circle of just being nice to our own relatives or our own children, and making that circle like bigger and bigger and bigger until it encompasses all beings regardless, is actually doing something that's opposite to the natural, what could be a natural programming of the human animal. So just acknowledging that, like finding it easier to be nice to the person who's in front of you than the person who's not in front of you. Like you could, some of us, we don't do this, but we could take like famous people, like, I don't know, movie stars or other kind of famous people that we have never met and we never will meet. And we could speak about them in ways that are very cruel and, mocking and, inconsiderate and just doing all these things, all this like horrible talk with reference to strangers, as if it doesn't even count for anything, like it's just in a fictional world. But then if you met that person, you would never talk to them that way. You just, it wouldn't be natural to do so. So just acknowledging what you have and doing the loving kindness practice. And especially towards beings who are more distant, making that a regular practice, and seeing if, imagining how you feel when you're face to face, what comes up, what does nature give you that helps you be considerate of somebody who's in front of you, and try to find out what that is, and then try to imagine bringing up the same kind of attitude when typing a message to somebody who's not in front of you. But it's a really good observation. That's what I'm saying. We need to be realistic to see what's really going on before we'll be able to improve and make progress on the path.
So I've been focusing a lot on metta in the past year, I would say. And I recently read a passage from this book called Exalted Immeasurable by Pasano Bhikkhu. And there was a passage where he said, just being able to pay attention to the breath or to experience is a tremendous kindness to oneself, because we always have a refuge. Like your refuge could be anxiety, worry, fear. So where are you going to place that refuge? And just being able to watch experience, kind of just watch the internal experience as this phenomenon and have that equanimity is actually deeply connected to metta. And that's something that I've been working with. So.
Thank you. We've come to the end of our time, so I think I'll let that be the last comment. And if you don't mind staying a couple of seconds more, we can recite the passage of equanimity This is, we recited this before. This is the reflection on universal well-being. The last paragraph is about all beings are the owner of their action, the owner of their karma. And that's the passage that we recite when we're trying to bring up equanimity. So I'm going to share the screen and then we can recite this small thing and then give pay respects to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may I maintain well-being in myself. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. May all beings be released from all suffering, and may they not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their action and inherit its results. Their future is born from such action, companion to such action, and its results will be their home. All actions with intention, be they skillful or harmful, of that they will be the heirs. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one, I render homage to the Buddha, the blessed one. The teachings so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. Thank you, everybody, for your patient participation, and